The Young and the Restless spoilers. Fridays, May 16, 2025. Victor Newman leaned back in his plush leather chair as the last notes of the jazz trio's set drifted across the lounge. The soft murmur of applause and clinking glasses filling the space with a comfortable din. Phyllis sat across from him, her emerald dress catching the lamplight, diamond necklace glinting as she shifted in her seat. She dared to hope that tonight's confrontation might mark a turning point in their alliance. The moment when hidden agendas and whispered alliances in darkened streets gave way to a clear-eyed partnership, one built on power rather than subterfuge. Yet even as she allowed herself that possibility, Victor's next words cut through her fantasies like a scalpel. "I want more," he said, and his voice was the low rumble of distant thunder. "I need you to deliver a campaign that will break Billy Abbott's reputation once and for all." His gaze was cold but intent, the kind of gaze that had toppled empires and reduced rivals to ash. Phyllis felt a thrill of exhilaration at the prospect. Billy had underestimated her once, and now she had the chance to orchestrate his downfall. She nodded, smoothing the silk of her dress. "I have already begun planting seeds," she said. Rumors of his financial impropriety, whispered suggestions that Dumas's dealings were facilitated by him, insinuations that his loyalty to Newman Enterprises is negotiable. Victor tapped a finger against the armrest. "Make it personal. Let's remind Billy what it feels like to watch his world unravel." He paused, then added casually, as if changing topics in a board meeting rather than plotting corporate ruin, "Chelsea Lawson is on his tail, too. She's been giving my nephew a piece of her mind." Phyllis raised an eyebrow. "Chelsea," she echoed. "His wife." She knew Chelsea Lawson had a fiery temper and a sharp tongue, but she had not realized that Victor intended to use her discontent as fuel. Victor smiled thinly. "She's been riding Adam hard about every misstep he's made. I want her to press him in public, to make him look as hapless as Billy is about to look foolish." Phyllis's mind spun with possibilities. Chelsea's barbed comments at family dinners broadcast on social media, Adam's flustered attempts at defense, his pride bleeding out in real time for the world to see. It would be delicious. Victor stood, straightening his jacket. "And there's another matter. Nate Hastings." He motioned for a server to pour another round of bourbon. "I'm bringing Damien Kane into the family business. I want Nate to welcome him, make it look like my company is expanding, evolving. We'll use Damien's arrival to distract from the Abbott scandal and the Newman domestic spat." Phyllis smiled, sensing the final pieces of a grand chessboard clicking into place. The next morning, the Hastings residence on Genoa City's north side buzzed with energy. Audra Charles, dressed in a crisply tailored suit, paced the marble foyer, tapping her phone with one manicured finger. Over the weekend, Victor had greenlit her funding proposal for a new biotech initiative, but that approval had yet to land on her desk. She paused by the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the manicured lawn, wondering if Nate was about to question her, or worse, doubt her competence. "Why do I feel there's something about this deal you're not telling me?" he demanded when he finally appeared, dark eyes wary. She turned to face him, smoothing a strand of mahogany hair back behind her ear. "I can handle Victor," she replied, shoulders squared. "I went to Tucker McCall's school. I know how to navigate these waters." Before Nate could respond, the doorbell rang. Nate crossed to the door and opened it, revealing Damien Kane standing with Amy Lewis at his side. Amy's hazel eyes shone with a mixture of exhaustion and relief, her auburn hair loosely pinned as though she had rushed over after a long flight. "Welcome home," Nate said warmly, stepping aside so they could enter. Audra greeted Amy with a bright smile. "You look fantastic," she said, helping her with her coat. Damien offered a courteous nod, concern flickering in his eyes as he glanced at Amy. "You must be tired," he said softly. "Why don't you rest upstairs?" Audra guided Amy toward the staircase while Damien turned back to Nate, his expression inquisitive. "I hope you'll tell me what it's like, joining the family business. There's opportunity here that I think I could really embrace." Nate closed the door, leaning against the frame as he regarded his brother. "I'm surprised you're even considering it," he admitted. Damien's brow furrowed. "Why? Don't you trust me anymore?" Nate shook his head, folding his arms. "It's not that. I've moved beyond all that. I'm just trying to protect you, Adrian." Damien's eyes glinted with quiet intensity. "You don't protect me by doubting me," he said softly. "You protect me by standing by me." Nate's shoulders slumped. "All I can say is, welcome to Newman Enterprises." At the top of the staircase, Amy and Audra exchanged excited glances, the future suddenly shimmering with possibility. Back at Newman Enterprises headquarters, Victor convened an emergency meeting with his PR team. Phyllis sat at the head of the long mahogany table, confident in her new mandate. Project Abbott Exposé moved into high gear. Her carefully curated leaks circulated through business journals, the whispers amplified on gossip websites, Chelsea's veiled barbs about Adam's leadership incompetence shared across social media platforms. Within days, Billy Abbott's name was linked to shell companies and questionable fund transfers. Adam was portrayed as perpetually flummoxed by his own wife's relentless criticisms. Nate's welcoming of Damien was heralded as a bold step toward innovation, a welcome distraction from the brewing storm. But as the tide of public opinion shifted, a subtle tension flickered between Victor and Phyllis. She sensed his calculating gaze, as if he were already plotting his next move to ensure he maintained the upper hand in their partnership. Her success in orchestrating the smear campaign had proven her value, yet she knew that Victor's alliances were never final, his alliances mutable instruments to be discarded once their use expired. She sipped her bourbon thoughtfully, eyes settling on the skyline beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Downstairs, Chelsea Lawson cornered Adam in the Newman family kitchen, her arms crossed over her designer blouse. "You left all the financials to me," she snapped, voice rising. "And you wonder why I'm frustrated?" Adam rubbed his temples, fatigue etched on his features. "Chelsea, I'm doing everything I can," she cut him off with a sharp laugh. "Really? Your best isn't enough. Not for Victor, not for me, and certainly not for the Abbott legacy." Her words stung like acid, and Adam's normally unflappable demeanor cracked. He opened his mouth, then closed it, swallowing his retort as the front door swung open and Nate greeted Damien on his first official day at work. In Victor's private office, Phyllis reviewed the latest analytics of the campaign's reach, engagement metrics, sentiment analysis, news cycles. The numbers were staggering, a 50% spike in negative coverage of Billy Abbott, a trending hashtag Abbott exposed, and Chelsea's viral posts attacking Adam's leadership had racked up millions of views. Even the Nate Damien storyline had captured public imagination, providing a human interest counterpoint that softened the edges of Victor's calculated vendetta. She allowed herself a triumphant smile. Tonight she would toast her success in that same jazz lounge, a fitting stage for the power play she had orchestrated. As dusk settled over Genoa City and the neon lights flickered to life, the Newman empire throbbed with activity. Boardrooms hummed with strategy sessions, private jets sat on tarmacs ready for business trips, and the sharp scent of ambition tingled in the air like electricity before a storm. Phyllis knew the next steps would demand even greater finesse, keeping Victor satisfied without losing her own freedom, managing the fallout from her own machinations, and protecting Summer's European ventures from being eclipsed by the chaos she had unleashed at home. In the end, it was Julia's voice, Phyllis's personal assistant, on her secure line that brought her back to reality. "Miss Summers, Mr. Newman is ready for tonight's debrief." Phyllis inhaled deeply, straightened her posture, and tapped the screen to accept the video call. Victor's stern silhouette filled the display, his expression unreadable. She raised her glass to the camera and offered a measured smile. "Shall we toast to the future?" she asked. For a moment, he said nothing, the faint hum of the city behind him. Then he nodded once. "To the future," he echoed, and the screen went dark. Phyllis sat back, eyes alight with victory and the faintest glimmer of anticipation. The game was afoot, the pieces were in motion, and the night's jazz still lingered in her ears, an echo of the elegant menace and sublime beauty that power could wield when in the right hands. And as the door to her penthouse closed behind her, she felt the thrill of control wash over her. At last, she was no longer merely the puppet trailing Billy's secrets in the shadows. She was a strategist in her own right, comfortably seated at Victor Newman's side, ready to claim her share of an empire forged in whispers, secrets, and steel. Victor Newman guided Phyllis through the jazz club's velvet-draped entrance, the satin hush of the crowd yielding to the smoky glow of antique chandeliers overhead. The piano's languid melody wove between tables, where patrons nursed glasses of amber bourbon and exchanged muted conversations, oblivious to the storm gathering in the alcove beyond. Phyllis settled into the plush banquette across from Victor, her emerald green dress pooling around her like liquid silk. Candlelight danced on her diamond necklace as she crossed her legs and inclined her head, all poise and confidence. "I spoke with Summer today," she began, her tone light, as if arranging a social call rather than a power play. "She's in Milan, working for an incredible fashion house. They adore her eye for design, her ability to spot trends before they're born." She let the words hang there, an offering of prestige and familial pride. Victor regarded her coolly, lips curved in a near smile. "That's nice," he said, voice as smooth and calculated as the bourbon he cradled. "But tell me about Billy." Phyllis's chest tightened. Despite her careful preparation, she felt a flicker of impatience in his gaze. She inhaled, recalling the long hours spent following his every move, the recordings she'd risked her life to capture. "I have it," she said, leaning forward so only he could hear. "Everything Billy agreed to with Dumas's locations, amounts, timelines. I can hand over a full dossier tonight." Victor's eyes narrowed. "And what do you want in return?" Phyllis forced a casual tilt of her head, letting smoke curl from her lips as she flicked the ash gently into a crystal ashtray. "I want you to fund a venture for my son," she replied. "I came to you out of loyalty, and because you know I'd take this information to the highest bidder if you refuse." He tapped a finger against the table, the movement precise and impatient. "You need to tell me exactly what you're offering, Phyllis. What is the asset? What is it that you're selling?" She drew in a steady breath, letting the jazz trumpet's plaintive cry underscore her words. "It's proof that Dumas, and through him, Billy, have been siphoning funds from Newman Enterprises into shell companies overseas. I have bank statements, email chains, witness affidavits. With this, you not only protect us from Dumas's games, you gain leverage to crush him." Victor's smile was almost indulgent. "I don't need your help," he said quietly, though the flicker in his eyes betrayed his interest. "Don't try to play me, Phyllis. Next time you come with a plan, know exactly what you're doing." She clenched her jaw, refusing to show her frustration. "If you won't use it, I will," she snapped. "And you'll regret underestimating me." Victor's gaze hardened. For a moment the candlelight shrank them both into silhouettes of steel and ambition. Then he turned away, sweeping a hand to dismiss her. The meeting was over, she had enough to force his hand, but she suspected the real negotiations were just beginning. Across town, Billy Abbott strode into the GCAC lobby with the purposeful gait of a man determined to reclaim his reputation. His suit was impeccably tailored, his tie knotted with precise confidence, but his eyes were stormed by anxiety. He caught sight of Adam Newman by the reception desk, clipboard in hand, and saw an open invitation for confrontation. Sure enough, Adam glanced up and offered a terse nod. "Billy," he said coolly. "We need to talk." Billy squared his shoulders. He opened his mouth to defend himself, to remind Adam that loyalty ran deeper than family rivalries, but a single icy glance from Chelsea Lawson, seated behind him on the barstool, cut him off. Chelsea's expression was a razor, disdain, disappointment, the weight of every unspoken accusation she'd ever leveled at him. Billy swallowed, tension coiling in his stomach, and turned away from Adam's poised retort. Adam's jaw clenched, but he forced himself to stay silent. He watched as Billy's phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with Dumas's encrypted message, a simple coordinate and a time. Without a word, Billy slipped away from the charged standoff and headed to the bar. He slid onto a stool, shoulders hunched, and raised his hand to catch the bartender's eye. "Scotch," he said, voice quieter than he intended, dread pooling behind his ribs. As the whiskey hit the glass, his heart pounded with the knowledge that the night's real reckoning awaited, and that Phyllis, armed with her recording, had already set the next move in motion. Back in the jazz club, Phyllis regrouped with her inner circle at a private table tucked behind a velour drape. She outlined her next steps. Planting the dossier on Victor's desk before dawn, preparing press leaks timed to coincide with Dumas's inevitable reaction, and arranging for Summer's fashion contacts to lend credence to the family's glamour and influence. Each detail drew nods of approval from her lieutenants, but Phyllis's thoughts flicked involuntarily to Billy, to Adam, to the endgame of ruin she'd engineered for them both. She wondered if Victor would truly defy Dumas and crush him, or if Dumas's shadow still loomed too large. Victor materialized at her side, eyes like dark glass. "I've made my decision," he said, his tone unreadable. Phyllis leaned in, pulse racing. "And?" His lips curved once, a subtle triumph. "We move tomorrow." He tapped the table where her recorder lay, a silent promise of the power it now held. She lifted her glass in a toast as the piano's final chord dissolved into applause, feeling the electric pulse of victory, and the promise of fresh conflict, thrumming beneath every note. Outside, the city slept under a blanket of expectation. Somewhere, Billy's barstool awaited his regret, Adam's pride braced for humiliation, and Summer's Milanese triumph glittered as a beacon of all that Phyllis had secured. The jazz club's door closed behind her with a soft whisper, leaving only the echoes of possibility and threat in its wake, an ending that was, truly, only the beginning. Chelsea's voice was low but insistent as she leaned across the marble countertop of the GCAC bar, her gaze fixed on Billy's furrowed expression. The dim overhead lights caught the sharp angles of her cheekbones and the defiance in her eyes. "This is never going to get better," she said, her tone weary. "Not until you and Adam quit tearing each other apart." Billy's fist clenched around the stem of his glass, knuckles whitening. He inhaled slowly, the burn of whiskey at the back of his throat giving him courage. "I'm not stepping back," he replied, voice steady but edged with frustration. "You ever regret getting back with Adam? Because if I've learned anything, it's that reconciliation isn't exactly your strong suit." Chelsea's jaw tightened. She stared at the swirling amber liquid without answering, her silence heavier than any retort. After a long moment, she lifted her eyes to his. "You ever get tired of being at war?" she asked softly, but with real pain beneath the words. Billy's gaze flicked upward, and a bitter smile touched his lips. "I'd stay in my lane if Adam would stay in his," he said, leaning back on the barstool so that the polished wood creaked beneath him. "But he can't, because Dad's the one pulling the strings. Tugging him around like some puppet on a string." As though summoned by mention of his name, Adam Newman appeared just beyond the bar's brass footrail. His posture was guarded, arms folded in front of him, eyes scanning the confrontation as though calculating the right moment to interfere. Chelsea and Billy both turned as Adam's silhouette blocked the glow of the backlit liquor bottles. "What are you two talking about?" he asked, voice measured. Chelsea straightened, crossing her arms. "Just discussing how exhausting it must be to keep up this battle," she said, and then recounted a clipped version of their exchange, Billy's stubbornness, her longing for peace, his retort about their father's machinations. The summary sounded abstract, almost dull, yet Adam's jaw clenched with every syllable, the tension radiating from him in waves. Chelsea shot Billy a quick, exasperated glance. He shrugged as if to say, "What else could I say?" And Adam's eyes narrowed before he pivoted and walked away without another word, leaving Chelsea and Billy alone once more. When the bar's chatter filled the space again, Billy let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He watched Adam retreat toward the reception area, then turned his attention back to Chelsea. She rubbed her temples, frustration and concern warring behind her dark eyes. "That's who he is," she muttered. "And that's why we're stuck." Billy's grip on his glass tightened. He emptied the rest of his drink in one long swallow, then set the empty tumbler down with a hollow clink. "I can't trust him," he admitted, and the words felt like a confession, heavy on his tongue. Before Chelsea could respond, Victor Newman's unmistakable silhouette appeared beside him, filling the frame of the bar's mirrored backdrop. "Billy," Victor's voice cut through the background jazz and low conversation like a scalpel. The room seemed to hush at the sound of his name. "Do you have an answer for me?" He stood with the uncompromising authority that defined every boardroom in Newman Enterprises, hands clasped behind his back, eyes locked on Billy's. "Time is running out." Billy swallowed, straightening as much as his tension would allow. He turned to face Victor squarely. "I don't trust you," he said, the words sharp enough to leave an echo in the space between them. "So my answer is no." Victor's lips flattened into a thin line, the candlelight tracing the hard lines of his jaw. Without another word, he stepped away and strode toward the grand foyer, where the echo of his footsteps was swallowed by the high ceilings and marble floors. Reaching the center of the lobby, he raised a hand and sounded the bell mounted on the reception counter. The clear chime resonated, and moments later Adam Newman appeared at his side, as though summoned by the tone itself. "Son," Victor said, voice calm but bearing the weight of command, "I want you to launch the campaign to discredit Billy Abbott." The words landed like ordnance on Adam's shoulders. Adam nodded, eyes flashing with resolve.